Well, hello everyone. This time you see me walking down a very muddy track, and I'm in Formby, which is a few miles north of Liverpool. And believe it or not, I've come down here today to photograph a brick shed. I'll tell you a bit more about it when we get there, because I've still got about half a mile to go. So I'll see you in a bit. Well, behind me there, you might be able to see the burger stand, which is not really a burger stand. And this is the building I've come out to photograph. You're probably thinking, why bother? Let's get a bit closer and see what we can see. So, as you've probably guessed, that little single-storey brick-built shed is in fact a World War II control bunker for one of the famous decoy sites that became known as Starfish. Now, Liverpool had 14 of similar decoy sites surrounding the city during the early years of the Second World War. The intention was to set up dummy fires and lighting systems to attract enemy bombers away from their real target, and hopefully to drop their bombs on these decoy sites instead. The photograph you can see here is actually of the Formby decoy site, and the sort of black dots and specks that you can see dotted around in the foreground are various oil drums and fire sites, and the control bunker itself is away over to the left hand side, and the lane that I walked down to get there is marked off as Range Lane. Apologies for the moire pattern on these two images. They were taken, I think, from a newspaper or certainly a printed reference sheet, and this shows a bomb crater in the foreground and parts of a decoy site in the background. And there was some debate many years ago as to whether these decoy sites did actually attract any enemy bombs, and this one I hope goes to prove it. In this particular shot, if you look hard enough, you can see a little man's head peeping out above the parapet from, he's obviously standing or sitting inside this bomb crater. It's believed that around about 1,000 tons of enemy bombs were rained down on these decoy sites all over the country. And here we have a photograph of one being tested or demonstrated with a couple of the, whether they're Home Guard or enlisted men, I don't know, in the foreground, but this is what they sort of looked like. Fairly Heath Robinson, I think, but of course that's all you needed. I did come across an interesting story by a Mr. Jeff Edmonds, who was a wireless operator at the Formby Starfish site, and he says that he was billeted, first of all, by a lady who lived in Ryeground Lane, and this is Ryeground Lane in Formby, and he would have walked the mile and a half from the house down to the Starfish site every night. He would quite often take a walk through the sand dunes while doing his patrols, making sure that the installation was ready for action, so to speak. And he would quite often call into Gentleman's Cottage, Joe's cottage, have a cup of tea and a cigarette with him. And Joe was the owner of some asparagus fields. And the area around Formby is still famous for growing asparagus. So I just did some stills of the building. Not quite sure why the graffiti artists have concentrated on burgers, but there we are. It's one of these buildings that is plastered in graffiti, none of which is very offensive. In fact, I couldn't see anything offensive there at all. I'm glad to say there were no sharps or anything like that inside the building. There's not a great deal of it left, so pretty limited with regard to what I could photograph. And I had the Olympus EM1 Mark II with me on this occasion, just the one lens, the 12-50. So all these are taken with that combination. After having taken a limited number of shots of the actual control bunker, I then went further out into the sand dunes and took some shots of these dead trees. I love the way these pine trees are whipped into peculiar shapes by the wind. Did a couple of close-ups with the 12-50 using the so-called macro facility, and I did like the lichen on these dead branches, and I also managed to get a couple of shots of this 5-spot burnet moth. So a very short outing, but I did want to record the Starfish site. There's very few of them left above ground now, so I wanted to record it, not for posterity, but for my own record, really. And I hope you've got a little bit of amusement and interest from watching this. More history than photography, granted, but nevertheless, it was something that I wanted to complete, and I hope you enjoy it. So until the next time, I'm going to say enjoy your photography, everybody, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye for now.